Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about something that's really important to me, which is diversity, especially neurodiversity in fandom worlds. Now, we know J.K. Rowling is not famous for her diversity, so it's up to us, the fans, to create a diverse world where the characters represent those types we need. Because it's illogical to think that in Hogwarts, a humongous wizarding school, one of the biggest wizarding schools in the world, that there are no special needs students, that there are no students with dyslexia or with autism or anything like that. So today, I'm going to sit down with you and talk about one of my autistic headcanons, which is Luna Lovegood. Disclaimer before we get started. I am not a doctor. I am studying autism in school and I'm autistic myself. Taking these things into account, I've done a lot of research and I am very knowledgeable about the disorder. So I hope you enjoy and welcome to the video. So before we get into Luna, we should talk about the DSM criteria for autism. Autism to be diagnosed by the DSM-5 has to fit two kind of domains. So deficits in social communication, and it has to have restricted repetitive behavior / interests. And those are divided further down, which I will go over as we talk about Luna. And so the history behind autism. Autism was first discovered by a Dr. Kanner in 1943. It was seen through 11 different children with abnormal behaviors, kind of like restricted interests, not looking people in the eye, things like that, and that could not be explained by any other disorder. So that's how they created autism. Autism is genetic, so if one family member has ASD, others are more than likely to have it due to genetic makeup. It is said that there are hundreds of genes and chromosomes that could be responsible for autism. We don't really know yet. Keep in mind, autism is a very young disorder. It hasn't been around for 100 years yet or so. It's super young in comparison to other disorders. So it's important to note that a lot of times females are not diagnosed because it was thought to be predominantly male. Now, an outdated term, which is Asperger's, was designed to diagnose boys with autistic-like traits, but not completely autistic per se. They didn't fit the DSM category at that time. So that's why it was now labeled as it's only for boys, girls cannot have autism, and they are not looked at for autism. So it's very likely, even if Luna was born in a neurotypical society, without magic, without anything, she wouldn't even be diagnosed. She wouldn't even be recognized as having autism. She'd be recognized as just being strange, which is a shame because she could have found community in her autism. Moving on. As autism is genetic, it is likely Luna's father has autism. In the books, we see he has a lot of similar traits to Luna, with his interests being restricted, with his hobbies not being very broad, with being very contained, and with his mannerisms. He has some weird mannerisms. I remember in the 7th movie, they were dancing and they were kind of doing this number or something. I don't really know. But it was not how you typically think you dance. And so for Luna, she probably grew up thinking, oh, this is normal. This is how we're supposed to be. We don't know much about Luna's mom, so don't really know if she shared the same eccentricities as her father, as Luna's father did, or if she was more what we would say neurotypical, more status quo. So Luna clearly has deficits in social communication. She has abnormal social approach and failure at a normal back and forth. When they first get on the train, they ask Luna if they can sit there. Luna doesn't even look up from her quibbler. She just sits there and nods her head like this. She doesn't really take a notice to them until they start putting their luggages up. And I'll read exactly from the passage what she does. So what I'm using to talk about Luna today is the 5th book, and let's see, so that's what we're going to use. I know there's some moments in the 6th book too that are kind of important, but I'm going to mainly keep it to the 5th. Maybe I'll do a part 2. Okay. Harry and Neville stowed the 3 trunks in Hedwig's cage in the luggage rack and sat down. The girl called Luna watched them over her upside-down magazine, which was called The Quibbler. She did not seem to need to blink as much as normal humans. She stared and stared at Harry, who had taken the seat opposite her and now wished he had not. Have a good summer, Luna? Ginny asked. Yes, said Luna dreamily, without taking her eyes off Harry. Yes, it was quite enjoyable, you know. You're Harry Potter, she added. I know I am, said Harry. So see, that was an abnormal social approach. It was kind of strange because she stared and stared at Harry, like she'd taken an interest in just looking at Harry. Usually people who are neurotypical kind of expect you to look away and not stare. I struggle with staring sometimes as an autistic individual because I see something interesting and I zero in on it. To Luna, in that time, it's safe to assume that Harry was the interesting thing that she wanted to know about. Because in her mind, she's just trying to understand him and understand who he is. She's not so worried about the social skills or what other people think of her looking at him, because she knows him from something and she realized, oh, you're Harry Potter. And then she also has the abnormal nonverbal communicative factors with the staring, which some people with autism stare too much, some don't look you in the eye at all. It really depends on the autistic person. And she also has, in this little interaction, this first interaction we see her with Harry, Neville, and Ginny, she struggles with kind of doing restricted behaviors. And here's going to be my example. No, you're not, said Ginny sharply. Neville Longbottom, Luna Lovegood. Luna is in my years, but in Ravenclaw. With beyond measure is man's greatest treasure. Sorry, said Luna in a sing-songy voice. She raised her upside-down magazine high enough to hide her face and fell silent. Harry and Neville looked at each other with their eyebrows raised. Ginny suppressed a giggle. So what Luna did was what we commonly call scripting. So she scripted something she heard because she either liked the sound or it served a function of her moving her mouth. And it's just due to sensory. It's a restricted repetitive behavior that's commonly seen with autism. Echoing too is often seen, and like I think there was a passage in here, let me look for it, that I marked. I can't find it, but there's a point where she just repeats things over and over and over again and she's laughing so hard. So it's repeating things at an improper time. So I've had, because I also work with clients who have autism, I've had clients repeat things from movies they've heard, such as Scooby-Doo, Curious George, just cartoons they watch. It's common because it's a sensory thing. And autism is very much a sensory disorder. It's like your brain's totally wired differently. So besides the other things she kind of does, which makes me think she's autistic, oh, there it is. So she's kind of has like inappropriate sort of responses to things, to social situations that we were talking about earlier. So here's the passage. Everyone laughed, but nobody laughed harder than Luna Lovegood. She let out a scream of mirth that caused Hedwig to wake up and flap her wings indignantly, and Crookshanks to leap up into the luggage rack hissing. She laughed so hard that her magazine slipped out of her grasp, split down her legs, and onto the floor. That was funny! Her predominant eyes swam with tears as she gasped with breath, staring at Ron. Utterly nonplussed, he looked around at the others who were laughing now at the expression on Ron's face and at the ludicrously prolonged laughter of Luna Lovegood, who was rocking back and forward and clutching her sides. Are you taking mimicry? Said Ron, looking at her. Baboon's backside, she choked, holding her ribs. So that's an example of echoing too, which is common in autism. It's often echoing happens as another sensory thing, kind of the same function as scripting. They like the sound or they like the feel of their mouth as it moves to echo. Like I often echo just because I just do it out of habit. And so someone will give me instructions and I'll repeat the end of the instruction back to them unintentionally. Sometimes it helps me with my anxiety and regulates my emotions. It can have all sorts of functions. And then there is the deficits and relationships for Luna. Luna obviously struggles. People call her Loony Lovegood and other just rude names. and she doesn't really have that social interaction that she desires. Like, she wants friends, kind of, it can be seen, but she doesn't have them. People make fun of her. People at the end of the book had hidden her stuff, and she had to go around and find all of her things that people hid from her, which, that's kind of rude, not gonna lie. Like, I wouldn't like if someone hid my stuff, but Luna seems to take it in stride. She also has kind of a special relationship with animals, which is, funnily enough, I did some research, and there was this study out of the UK that used like a group of children, and they were given the choices of objects, animals as therapy dogs, and people to choose from to interact with for like a period of 20 minutes, I believe. And it was shown that autistic children interacted 2 times more with the dog than with the people, and 16 times more with the dog than with the objects. So clearly they have a special relationship with animals, and I personally prefer animals to people. And it was found in that study in 2009 that autistic individuals have a bigger preference to animals than to people, because animals don't judge you. They don't have a problem if you flap your hands or do anything that you would count as strange. And myself and other autistic people enjoy that. I don't like being seen as kind of weird, you know. It makes people not want to spend time with me. Why would I like spending time with people who judge me? That doesn't sound fun to me. And so Luna obviously has a special relationship with animals. Let me find that passage. So in here, she says, it's when they're getting into the carriages with the thrushels. "It's all right," said a dreamy voice from beside Harry as Ron vanished into the coach's dark interior. "You're not going mad or anything. I can see them too." "Can you?" said Harry desperately, turning to Luna. He could see the bat-winged horses reflected in her wide silvery eyes. "Oh yes," said Luna. "I've been able to see them ever since my first day here. They've always pulled the carriages. Don't worry, you're just as sane as I am." Smiling faintly, she climbed into the musty interior of the carriage after Ron, and altogether reassured, Harry followed her. So even though that's not the best example, she did not seem alarmed at the animals. It's shown throughout the books that she has a special relationship with the animals at Hogwarts, and she often spends time with them because they don't hide her stuff or hurt her. And that's kind of common, because bullying for children who are on the autism spectrum, they are more at risk. 50%, according to one study in 2018, on bullying, those kids reported being severely bullied compared to neurotypical children and children with IDD. That's a big percentage of autistic individuals being bullied, and severely, 58%. Luna is definitely bullied a lot throughout the whole series. People call her loony, people mess with her, and she kind of takes it all in stride, or she doesn't realize that people are messing with her. She also doesn't have the best friendships. Harry in the 6th book invited her to go to Slughorn's party with him, and she's like, "Oh, I've never been invited to a party before," which is really sad, because I mean, I know what it's like to be excluded from birthday parties and things like that because you don't seem like you're normal. Normal's overrated. Let's just be honest. And finally, something that sets Luna apart is her restricted/repetitive interests. So according to one study, 75% to 90% of individuals with ASD develop one or more special interests. And that was back in 2014 when they found that statistic. Luna definitely has a special interest in animals and kind of the quibbler and things like that, like her father does. She really looks up to her father. He's kind of her hero in a lot of regards, which to me is really interesting that she takes such an interest in her father. But it kind of also makes sense because her father is just as strange as she is strange. Autistic. Autistic does not always equate to strange. And she's also very smart, which does not have to be a sign of having autism. Some people with autism have normal intelligence, some have above average intelligence, and some have below average intelligence. It really depends on the person. Not everyone's a savant like Sean from The Good Doctor. And that's why we need conversations about this, because it's shocking how many people don't really understand the neurological differences that someone with autism has and how actually similar they are to them. And some important things to note about autism is that it can be seen early or late. So Luna has been seen early when she was sorted in a Ravenclaw and stuff like that. She already had that strangeness about her. She got her nickname Loony Lovegood very young. And then to be diagnosed with autism, they have to cause social, occupational, or other types of impairment. So Luna definitely has social impairment. She struggles. She's very smart. She loves to know things, and she works with the animals, and she has all these great attributes, but she struggles socially. Someone who surprisingly can see past her social struggles is Harry, which I wouldn't expect, but at the same time, it kind of makes sense. He was socially outcasted by the Dursleys until he went to Hogwarts and found his people. The Weasleys took him in as their own while he was at Hogwarts. But before, he was seen as a freak. He was bullied. He was chased down the street. He had to wear this stupid boiled uniform that used to be Dudley's, that Aunt Petunia died in boiling water, which was weird to me. But he could understand her with the social outcast aspect piece. He thought she was cool, which was strange, but not at the same time, if that makes sense. And then the last criteria is not better explained by intellectual disability. So an intellectual disability usually means below average intelligence, and autism can be paired with an intellectual disability. It can be PDD, persuasive developmental disorder. Luna does not have that. Luna is definitely above average intelligence, if not average. And there's no way she's below average intelligence. And that's important to note, because that is when physicians are diagnosing autism, they look at those things. What are their intelligence? What are their aptitude for language? Things like that, because they have to know that to code the autism right. So taking all of this into account, what do you think? Does Luna have autism? I think she does. I will link down below all the articles and research I did for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was informative, and I hope you guys like this. I'll see you next time. Bye.